Stone Cold Prose, building better words.
Why are gamers so angry nowadays? Why is the gaming space in a state of upheaval, both culturally and economically, when the number of gamers on this planet is now over 3 billion, and the gaming industry on pace to make 455 billion in profits in 2024 alone? And why are game studios, developers, and even journalists so hostile to their own audience? Hi guys. Welcome back to Stone Cold Prose, where we build better words, better thoughts, and better men. I'm Miles Watson, novelist and author of numerous award-winning series, including Cage Life, Sinner's Cross, and The Chronicles of Magnus. I worked in Hollywood for over 12 years, law enforcement for over 10, and now I break it all down and build it back better. So let's get into this. When I was in Hollywood, I spent 9 years working in gaming. Specifically on game trailers. I worked at 7 different trailer houses on dozens of major titles, including some of the biggest franchises in the history of gaming. And I even won a share of a Cannes Lion some years ago, although I couldn't afford the 1,400 euros it costs to get the trophy. Maybe one day. Anyway, in the time I spent in the game space, I came to understand modern gaming in a way I hadn't as just a casual offline tabletop gamer who preferred retro games and only very occasionally came onto Steam. But I developed a healthy respect for the passion my colleagues, many of whom became close friends of mine, had for gaming. The image I'd had of hardcore gamers, that of comic book guy from The Simpsons, fat and misanthropic, gave way to a belated realization that gaming was an uber-democratic space whose appeal cut across every conceivable demographic you could possibly think of. And despite all the trash talk and all the silliness involved, I'm looking at you, League of Legends, most corners of the gamosphere were populated by normal folks looking to have a good time, go figure. They either wanted the simple adrenaline rush of something like a PvP or a much more immersive experience, one where you could lose yourself completely in an alternative reality. I came to have a great respect for the passion gamers had for gaming and the special language they developed to describe it. And frankly, for the happiness it brought so many of them, which, let's face it, is kind of rare nowadays. Now, I laid my controller in a professional capacity down in 2020. And I'm not as plugged into the scene as I once was by any means, but you'd have to live on the moon not to be aware of the tectonic shifts in the gaming industry in recent years, both culturally and economically, and in terms of the way the industry itself regards its own consumers. Gamers, who used to basically be this guy, are fed up and angry, while those that make the games and those that write about them in the media have developed this incredibly high-handed, tone-deaf, even adversarial relationship with their own audience, as I just said. Here at the end of 2024, things have finally come to a head. Gaming YouTubers are getting sued. Industry workers are leaking information to said YouTubers to expose the environments of toxic positivity and ideological obsession within the industry. Some outfits are even shutting down in the wake of colossal failures, like Concord, which cost between $400 and $500 million and killed Firewalk Studios in one blow. What the hell's happening, you ask, and how did it come to be? Well, the answer is complicated, but I can boil it down to a single sentence. Woke invaded the gaming space, and gamers have freaking had it. For a long time, gaming seemed to be impervious from the cult-like thinking that overtook and ruined Hollywood movies and television shows. There were problems in the industry, sure, and I saw them up close. Premature releases that were glitchy and bug-ridden, and issued with day one patches that were glitchy and bug-ridden, and that basically reduced gamers to beta testers or even Q&A testers who essentially had to pay for the privilege of testing a product. Grossly overpriced games, microtransactions that were anything but micro in the aggregate. The list is long, you get it. But these issues were primarily ones of corporate greed, which is hardly unique to the gaming industry. No. What tipped the scale was the intrusion of wokeness and politico-social ideology into gaming itself, from the people who develop and produce the games to the gaming media that covers the game space. It was a gradual, insidious, systematic infiltration of the game space with one objective: do to gaming what they had already done to Hollywood and make ideological talking points, diversity, box checking, and intrusive themes concerning sex, race, and gender rather than actual entertainment. That was the focus of games themselves. No longer were games to be fun for the sake of fun. No, that party was over. Every game had to insert the message into its programming. And every media outlet devoted to gaming had to make sure, often by the most grotesquely dishonest means, that the actual quality of games was no longer relevant to the ratings a game received. Like the communists of the 1930s who rated fiction and cinema, including even going back as far as Shakespeare, according to its adherence to Marxist principles rather than on its merits, the so-called gaming journalists of today didn't give a damn about playability. A billion-dollar banger like Hogwarts Legacy was given shit reviews or not reviewed at all simply because of its association with J.K. Rowling, whose leftness was not left enough for the leftists of the lefties. Say that 10 times fast. Meanwhile, people like Alyssa Mercante, Anita Sarkeesian, and Froskuren, who has so many names I wonder if she ever had a real one, came to various levels of influence and prominence over gaming without, in some cases, actually being gamers themselves. In the case of Sarkeesian, for example, she was simply a feminist advocate who inserted herself or injected herself into the game space during Gamergate 1 in the hopes of altering the gaming landscape to bring it into line with her own personal ideology. More cynically, some might say, so she could become a gaming consultant. In a sense, Sarkeesian could be seen as a forerunner of an organization like Sweet Baby Inc., a company which teaches other companies how to be woke, and is held responsible for creating the culture, see what I did there, environment in which political brainwashing rather than playability and story are now the real objective of video games. Now, some time ago when Amazon released its first trailer for the Rings of Power, the Critical Drinker dropped a video entitled "The Line Must Be Drawn Here." It was his wish and his hope, and in part I think his prediction, that the forces of woke went a bridge too far when they got their tentacles on the work of J.R.R. Tolkien. It was bad enough that they had sucked the lifeblood out of things like Star Trek and Star Wars and Ghostbusters and The Witcher and Indiana Jones and all the rest of it. But once those slimy suckers landed on Tolkien and Middle-earth, shit got real. Tolkien was off limits. Tolkien was sacred for tens, if not several hundreds of millions of human beings around this troubled globe for the last 80 years. Tolkien is, was, and always has been an inviolate sanctuary for the imagination, a refuge from the real world and all of its ugliness and stupidity. The violence of this reaction shook the forces of woke in Hollywood and ended up turning Rings into a colossal financial failure, albeit one Jeff Bezos can easily afford, hence Season 2 of Rings of Power. Yet it may have been one of those battles which, while seemingly inconclusive at the time, is seen through the lens of history to be a turning point in a much larger struggle. Why do I mention Rings of Power when we're talking about gaming? Well, here's where it gets personal for this former professional gamer who still prefers his games offline. By the way, I just beat my friend Nate 7-6 in the temple on GoldenEye 1998 called, and I picked up the phone. Shocking as it may seem now, I was not always the 11 out of 10 stud muffin you see before you, throbbing with animal masculinity. No, I was a nerd. And like all nerds in the 1980s, the pre-internet 1980s, I was frequently lonely and lived inside my head, courtesy of fantasy worlds like Star Wars or Battlestar Galactica or Frank Herbert's Dune. I had an Atari. I played Dungeons and Dragons and a hybrid electronic board game called Dark Tower. Now, for people like me, the gradual establishment of a small circle of friends was a painstaking achievement that often took years to accomplish. And that small circle of friends, united by their love of sci-fi, fantasy, gaming, what have you, became for some kids the only safe and happy place they had in their entire lives. They were bullied at school. They were sometimes bullied at home. And if they weren't bullied, they were often completely ignored, which can psychologically be just as bad. But come that Friday or Saturday night, the calls would go out and the circle would gather in someone's parents' garage or basement, and the delivery pizzas would arrive by the stack, and the sodas and chips get distributed, and the 20-sided dice would fly. And for a few precious, precious hours, these marginalized outcasts knew what it meant to be accepted and were able to be themselves without fear of ridicule or attack. For a few precious, precious hours, they were the cool kids, the studs, the kings. If you've never been in that situation, you have no idea how precious those moments were, how much they meant, how deeply they were treasured and are remembered, and how ferociously they were protected. Let me give you an example. When I was in 5th grade, I saw a kid who checked every nerd box you can think of physically pick up a bully and body slam him on the gym floor so violently I thought the bully was dead, or at least unconscious. Turns out the bully, who had taken off on this kid since probably kindergarten, had made a fatal mistake. He'd gotten hold to one of the nerds' comic books and tried to tear it up. Next thing I knew, bully was in the shadow realm getting made fun of by his shadowy bully ancestors. It was a judo throw, executed by a kid who didn't know judo and wouldn't have recognized judo if he'd seen him. He had taken shit unlimited from this other kid, the bully, for years without retaliation of any kind. But not this time. Not when that son of a bitch put his mitts on Sergeant Rock or G.I. Joe or Batman or whatever comic it had been. That was about 1983. But believe me, nothing has changed in 2024. For many gamers, not all, perhaps not even most, but for millions of them, gaming is their house. It's not yours, it's theirs. Theirs. Their private space in which they rule, they command, they decide who's cool and who's not, and what's in fashion and what isn't. And if you come into their home uninvited with bad intentions, they will fight you. And baby, they are fighting. Now I know what a lot of people will say when they see this, that gaming is full of toxicity and incels and misogyny and racism and all the rest of it. And you know what? They're right. In a community 3.1 billion strong, you're damn right you're going to have your share of trolls, morons, clowns, disruptors, cyberbullies, attention seekers, and just plain bad actors. But these people do not speak for the gaming community any more than a 400-pound body positivity activist with purple hair and a bone through her nose speaks for everyone who is overweight. The fact of the matter is that the gaming community wants an incredibly simple and reasonable thing. Like filmgoers and people who watch TV, they want to be entertained in return for their money. And they are willing to pay more than they should for this transaction. The sole power they demand, not ask for, demand, is that when a game does not meet their expectations, they can withhold their money and thus let the industry know that it took a wrong turn somewhere. See, by rewarding good games with their cash and punishing bad ones by withholding it, they have the power of course correcting the industry so that it doesn't fall off the map. This is basic economics, like 3rd grade economics. The modern gaming industry, however, has not only upended the bag of woke cockroaches into the home of gamers, it has taken to attacking gamers themselves for the failures of the industry. One of many examples, and perhaps the most recent of all the examples, is Corinne Bush, the director of Dragon Age Veilguard, which debuted to some pretty harsh criticism and is now viewed as one of the larger flops of 2024. Now, instead of simply taking the L, as everyone in the entertainment industry must from time to time do, and believe me, as an author I know, Corinne did what everyone in the gaming world does nowadays when things don't go their way. She went the Paul Feige Ghostbusters playbook, ripped out a page, and blamed a hate campaign for the fact that her game sucked. Her game was not what gamers wanted. It's ironic, isn't it, that wokeists talk about hate campaigns, considering the hate campaigns the Rainbow Mafia launched against Hogwarts Legacy, which included likening everyone who bought the game to participating in genocide, and even created a website to out people who bought the game on the internet so they can be mocked, insulted, doxxed, and threatened. And I wouldn't even get into the whole Alyssa Mercante smash JT debacle right now, except to say that the backlash against Mercante has been music to my ears. But there's a much larger and more sinister story behind that lawsuit, which I'll have to save for another day. Folks, whenever I go full retard against wokeness, I always figure anyone listening will write me off as being of a certain political persuasion and just stop there. But it isn't true. I'm a centrist, a common centrist, as Abe Lincoln used to say. I don't trust politicians of any kind. I don't drink any party's Kool-Aid. And the only axe I have to grind is the one I grind against these scheming, soulless, creatively barren parasites who come in only two subspecies: opportunists and fanatics. I hate them because I'm a storyteller and they've replaced storytelling with propaganda. I hate them because I saw at close range what they did, not only to Hollywood as an industry, but to many beloved franchises and IPs that I grew up watching. But I especially hate them because of their entitled arrogance, their belief that they have a right, an actual right, to enter a space in which they were not invited and are not wanted, and not only start bossing people around and shoving this poorly made crap upon them that they don't want, but to ridicule and bully the people in that space because they don't want it. It's one thing for you to be a self-righteous, virtue-signaling bully who lives in a joyless ideological bubble. It's another to lay awake nights, tormented to the point of insanity by the thought that someone, somewhere, has a little corner of their life over which you have no influence or dominion, where they can just enjoy themselves on their own terms, where they have the power and you don't. Folks, these people are not gate crashers. They're home invaders. They're about as welcome in gaming as a virus is in your bloodstream, and it's time they fucked off back to Virusville, preferably forever. Guys, if you enjoyed today's video, please remember to like, subscribe, comment, hit the notification bell, and remember to check out my books on Amazon. The link is in the description if I remembered to put it there. I drop scripted content every Friday at 3 p.m., shorts every day, and unscripted rambles whenever rage moves me to do so. See you next time, and until then, stay cold.